The worst pain I ever felt lasted exactly 3 seconds. Then I died. My name is Sarah and I need to tell you what happened to me on October 22, 2024. I need to tell you because time is running out and what I saw on the other side will change everything we know about what's coming. Before we continue, please let me know where you're listening from. It would be nice to feel closer, even if we're physically apart. Also, don't forget to like. It will help this video to reach so many people who need to listen to this testimony and leave a comment. Share your thoughts about this near-death experience testimony. Let's have a fair and open discussion so we can learn from each other here on this channel, and don't forget to subscribe for more of this content coming your way. When my heart stopped, what terrified me most was not the silence of my body but the echo of my soul. In those moments, I realized how fragile everything I had lived for truly was. My career, my possessions, my worries, none of them followed me into that void. Instead, what remained was my faith, or rather, the truth about whether my faith was real. I had always said I believed, but at that instant, I was forced to confront whether I had actually entrusted my heart to God or just spoken empty words. It wasn't the light that changed me first, nor the vision of eternity. It was the crushing weight of knowing that life could vanish in a breath, and all that stood between me and eternity was the state of my soul. I felt stripped of every excuse, every justification. My mind raced with questions. Had I truly forgiven those who hurt me? Had I ever really loved without condition? Had I trusted God beyond the moments of convenience? Those questions were sharper than any pain I had felt. They pierced me with a truth I could no longer escape. I realized in those seconds that faith is not about words we say in church or verses we memorize, it's about what our hearts cling to when everything else falls away. That was the beginning of my awakening, and it came not with visions, but with the undeniable confrontation of my own soul standing before eternity. In that suspended state, I became aware of something deeper than fear. It was accountability. For the first time, I could not hide behind distractions or noise. Every thought, every choice, every moment of love or selfishness stood in front of me like a mirror. And the question that thundered through my soul was simple: what have you really done with the life you were given? I wanted to run from that question, but there was nowhere to go. It clung to me. I thought about the grudges I had carried for years, the people I judged without knowing their pain, the moments I chose silence when I should have spoken love. Suddenly, I understood how heavy unforgiveness is. It chains you even when your body is free. And in death, there is no place for chains. Yet, even in that crushing awareness, I felt something unexpected: mercy. It wasn't condemnation that filled the space around me, it was a gentle invitation. It was as though God Himself whispered, "Yes, you have failed, but I am not asking for perfection. I am asking for surrender." That word, surrender, echoed through me. I realized faith was not about performing well, not about hiding flaws, but about letting go. Letting go of control, of anger, of the illusion that we can save ourselves. In those moments, I discovered that love is not earned, it's received. And that was when my heart began to shift. For years, I had spoken about faith but lived like it was optional, like God was only an accessory to my plans. But there, in the silence between life and eternity, faith was no longer optional, it was the only thing that mattered. It was not about saying, "I believe," but about deciding whom I would trust with my soul. That decision would shape everything that came next. As I lingered in that awareness, I realized something even more piercing than the fear of death, the fear of wasted life. I had lived so much of my time chasing approval, building walls of pride, and carrying wounds that I never allowed God to heal. And now, stripped of excuses, I could see how fragile it all was. What had seemed important, success, recognition, control, was nothing but sand slipping through my hands. In that stillness, another truth rose like a whisper: love was the only thing that had substance. Every time I had chosen kindness instead of anger, compassion instead of indifference, forgiveness instead of bitterness, that remained. It glowed in my memory like treasures of eternity. Everything else dissolved. And I thought to myself, if only I had loved more. If only I had trusted more. But here was the miracle: God was not shaming me for what I lacked. He was showing me that even now, even beyond death, His mercy was greater than my failures. That realization did not crush me, it freed me. I understood that faith was never about proving myself to Him, but about allowing His love to prove itself in me. And in that moment, I felt a shift. The chains of guilt loosened, the weight of regret began to lift, and I sensed a quiet voice urging me, take this message back. Tell them what truly matters. Tell them love is the measure of life. Friend, I share this with you not as a story to entertain, but as a truth that can transform. If you are carrying bitterness, let it go. If you are holding on to guilt, release it. What matters most is not what we build with our hands, but what we surrender in our hearts. If you long for God's protection over your life, type Amen in the comments. Let this be your first step of surrender, a small act of faith that heaven sees and honors. After that awakening, I was shown that love is not only the foundation of our lives but also the key to understanding what is coming. It was then that I became aware of 3 warnings, signs not meant to scare us, but to awaken us. Each one was like a message written on the soul, reminding humanity that time is precious and eternity is real. The first was a sound. Not music, not thunder, but something deeper, like the very heartbeat of creation calling us to listen. I realized it was not about the noise itself, but about what it revealed. The whole world would be forced to pause. For 7 minutes, no one could hide from the truth. It would be a universal call to remember who we are and where we belong. The second was light, spreading across the sky, unexplainable yet undeniable. At first beautiful, then strange, and finally terrifying to those unwilling to face it. But the light was not meant to destroy. It was meant to write across the heavens what God had been writing in our hearts all along: return to me. And the third sign was silence. For 1 hour, everything would stop, no voices, no movement, not even the wind. That silence, I understood, would not be emptiness. It would be revelation. In it, people would hear the loudest truth of all, the condition of their own hearts. These signs, I was told, were not punishments. They were gifts. They were the last invitation for humanity to surrender pride, to let go of bitterness, to prepare for the darkness that was not destruction but reset, a time for hearts to be changed. My friend, I don't share this to frighten you. I share it so you can prepare. The signs are coming. The question is not whether they will happen, but whether your heart will be ready when they do. When I heard about the coming darkness, my first instinct was fear. Darkness has always carried the weight of the unknown. But then I understood, this was not the darkness of destruction, but the darkness of restoration. Just as a seed must break in the soil before it can grow, the world too must pass through a silence and stillness so that hearts can awaken again. I was shown that during those 3 days, people would remember what truly matters. Without electricity, without distractions, without noise, families would turn toward each other again. Strangers would share what little they had, realizing that survival was not about food alone but about compassion. Parents would hold their children tighter, and children would discover that safety was not in the walls of their homes but in the love that bound them together. And in that stillness, God's voice would be clearer than ever. It would not thunder from the sky, it would whisper within the heart. Some would break under the weight of regret, but many would finally surrender. Tears would flow, prayers would rise, forgiveness would be spoken aloud. The darkness would not be a curse, it would be a reset, a mercy, a chance for humanity to choose love over fear. When the light returned after 3 days, the world would not be the same. For those who opened their hearts, life would take on a new clarity. Priorities would shift. Love would no longer be an option but a necessity. And I knew in my soul, this was God's way of giving us one last invitation to return to Him before the final chapter of history is written. Friend, let these words sink deep. The signs are not fantasy, they are warnings of grace. Do not wait for the sky to grow dark to choose love. Do not wait for silence to learn how to pray. Begin now. Surrender now. Because when the darkness lifts, what will remain is the truth of the choices we made. As my journey drew to its close, I understood that the message I carried was not about fear, but about hope. Death had stripped away every illusion, and what remained was the truth. Life is a gift, but eternity is the true destination. Every act of forgiveness, every word of love, every prayer whispered in faith is not lost, they are seeds planted in heaven, and they will never fade. I realized that what God wanted from me was not to terrify people with warnings, but to awaken hearts with love. The sound, the light, the silence, and the darkness are not punishments, they are invitations. Invitations to pause, to look inward, to remember that we were made for something greater than survival. We were made for communion with God and for love that outlasts death itself. When I returned from that place, I knew my task was simple yet urgent, to remind anyone who would listen that time is short, but grace is abundant. You do not need to be perfect. You do not need to have all the answers. You only need to be willing to surrender. Because when you surrender, love does the rest. Friend, if my story has touched your heart, do not let it slip away like another tale you hear and forget. Take it as a call, a personal invitation from God to you. Forgive those you've struggled to forgive. Release the bitterness that weighs you down. Open your heart to the one who calls you by name. If you desire His blessing and His protection, type Amen in the comments. Let your words be a declaration of faith, a step toward the eternal embrace of God's love. And if this message has spoken to you, share it, because someone else may be waiting for this reminder that they are loved, forgiven, and never alone.